Okay. When you developed that plan and when the plan was put into place, I guess what kind of resistance, if any, was there amongst the owners or key employees of the organization? Because once you devise a plan, and you need to then implement the plan and communicate the plan to your fellow owners and or key employees, I guess, what do you do about that resistance and how do you bypass that resistance as you move through those conversations? And we'll start with you, Jay.
Yeah, I think it was brought up earlier about we've had some issues with, I think, key employees who basically aren't around anymore because they were kind of my dad's people, and not that we wanted to make them successful and be part of the business, but they kind of looked at us differently. I guess they always looked at us as like we're my dad's kids, and I don't think they didn't really respect us or really appreciate what we were doing for the company. And so that was, there's been a lot of transitional things that we've had to encounter over the years. And so that's been difficult. And we've always tried to take care of everybody. My dad was paternalistic. We probably paid people, more than they were worth, and the balance was, things were out of balance for myself and my brothers for quite a while. And then I think what happened was in retrospect, we really didn't have much of a problem as time went on, because I think it became, I could pat ourselves on the back, but I think we demonstrated that we were underpaid for what we did, and so things are definitely in balance now. And so we're in the process of trying to come up with, better compensation plan for not only the ownership, but our key people, because we have a great group of people that we're working with now. And so we're kind of a work in process and trying to align our compensation with our strategic plan, and also to reflect our value system. We really work hard on our culture, and we want good character, good people, and they're really taking our company to the next level. So our compensation program, frankly, has to catch up with that. But it's always an issue. But
it's a work in progress.
Yes.
Right. Tom, how about you?
After I came up with the idea, I had a conversation with myself, and I thought I wasn't paid nearly enough.
So then you wrote that check. Yeah. But from the experiences, obviously, the key positions, when you're the one coming in and advising your client to say, this is what that position's going to hold, and you've got 3 other people in those same similar positions in your organization.
I've never had a client, or myself personally, that's paid somebody more than what they wanted to when the person succeeded thought they were paying too much. Right? And I've had people, when they pay a small amount, a menial amount, $25,000, $30,000, and they get somebody who's terrible, they think they're overpaying.
Sure.
Right? And I've had people hire somebody when they wanted to pay $175,000, they pay $225,000, and the person's great, and they say it's the best $225,000 they've ever spent in their life. So to me, it's about really the issue with key employee compensation is less about the actual compensation and more about the conversation and about the metrics and the management of the person in that role. And if it's family members, it's an understanding of what the expectations are. Right, there's a million books written about it with subordinates and leadership, but it's accountability. And when you create a situation where 4 people are paid the same and dividing profits and whatever it is what the discussion is on holding each other accountable. This is what your expectations are for the quarter.
Sure.
This is what my expectations are for the quarter. And did we deliver? And it's when you don't have those and the majority of my clients don't have those conversations. And for the first 8 or 9 years of my company, I didn't have those conversations. But when you realize you're not practicing what you preach, you start to learn from your mistakes, and I haven't had a problem since.
And Peter, when we chatted about this question before, you were the first generation, as you mentioned, that was more market-driven, and the ones that have followed you are even more so market-driven. Because you were the first, obviously, how did you feel about that on the inbound, as far as being held to a market driven price versus potentially what maybe somebody else might be getting paid in the company?
You know, when I graduated college, I was going to take a job outside of the family business. So my intention was 100% to not go that path. So, so I had an offer, and I was thinking, this is the way to go. And my dad started lightly leaning on me about just give it a try, just give it a try. So I was kind of thinking market anyway.
Okay.
And then when I went into it, I just didn't know any better. So that was just the way it was. So I assumed that all companies were that way. And then everybody that followed behind me was just sort of a culture for our generation. So it was pretty easy. The biggest resistance was you're the boss's kid, and you have to immediately prove yourself and gain respect. Otherwise, it just kind of destroys the culture in the company. So that was that's the biggest resistance we get and we fight on a daily basis. So
you're still fighting?
not so much now, but you constantly do as you grow and you get new people and people challenge you. But
Sure.
it's just it's all
It's part of the game.
it's part of the game. Yeah.
Part of the game.
Yeah.
About resistance, any?
Well, I think one word I haven't heard is transparency. And to me, in order to make these things work, whether it's ownership compensation or if you have a formula, that's great. But if the formula is happening behind the curtain and there's a wizard pulling on a bunch of
Cords.
giant cords that you can't see, it does no good. So there has to be some transparency, and I think you have to be able to share numbers with people. Doesn't mean everyone has to know what everybody else makes, but I think people fundamentally need to understand how the company's doing. I think you need to be able to share profit and a perspective on profit. So if some people, the raw numbers can be scary, either scary low or scary high. It doesn't really matter. But when if you throw out a number like $4 million and say that's what we made, and your employees are, but if instead they've heard all along that that our business should be driving whether it's 15% or 20% to the bottom line, whatever your number is, and you can give them some perspective on that, then it's not then you can share it.
Yeah.
And it takes time, it takes effort.
Education.
A lot of
A lot of
education.
education.
You have to be willing to spend time with people to get them to buy in and understand, and that allows you to have transparency. And there was one of my, I guess I'll call him a mentor, a peer/mentor, said to me years ago. He said, "No matter what you think, they think you're making more than you are." So it won't hurt. It really won't hurt to share. And again, it's not like you have to share the specifics, and this is where my money goes, and but I think giving that perspective, sharing numbers, sharing revenue numbers, sharing profit numbers, sharing expense ratios, letting people know sort of the critical things, I think is very important. Otherwise, it does look like you're playing sort of the Wizard of Oz, and you're standing behind a curtain somewhere just making up stuff, and they have no perspective.
Okay. In considering the succession of your business, and when I asked this question of Tom the other day, he goes, "Well, my kids are 9, 10, 12, but in consideration of your succession of your business or the businesses that you've served, I guess." How do you create a separate policy? It sounds like, Pete, your company has obviously made that marketability insurgence of that's the plan of getting the next generation in based on marketability, some performance-driven, metrics, what you're doing, and if you're a shareholder, then you're going to get a piece of the pie that way too. But for Jay, for Alan, and certainly Tom can speak to this too through his clients and maybe his perspective on his own future, I guess, do you have a compensation policy for the succession, and do you have those people in place, whether they're key employees or whether they're nieces and nephews, children at length that might be coming into your business, and do you have a policy ready for them? Jay, are you ready?
I hope so. Through the Family Business Council, we did some work with Ed Hoover. I don't know if some of you guys may remember Ed. We had some meetings with him, and we did come up with a policy. And right now, my brother John Jr.'s son is working in the business. But our policy is, we encourage our kids to work outside the business. We want them to work a minimum of 3 years. Have college, preferably college education, but at least some work experience. You know, they need to have some kind of success, you know, been promoted, and our military service is okay. And so we definitely want them to get outside experience, and we just don't want to create, you know, there's four brothers. I mean, so there's a lot of nieces and nephews. We can't create, you know, the last thing we want to do is create an entitlement mentality and culture. So the policy is, if they do come in, it's market driven. So we'll be much clearer on, you know, bringing them in and making sure they're paid appropriately for what they're doing. And we definitely want to communicate more, try not to wing everything. So we'll, you know, I guess, you know, fundamentally, you know, fortunately, we made it to the second generation. I know, being involved in this organization, I've heard the horror stories of how difficult it is. And so I know the third generation's exponentially more difficult. So we're going to have to plan a lot more. So we have a lot. We're just getting over the last go around, and now we got to start thinking about the third generation, which we got a lot to do there. So.
Alan, how about you?
Yeah, so my kids are of that age. This is personal, it's not a corporate policy. I've told my kids 5 years. And in our firm, you have to have a college degree to do almost anything. So they have to have gone to college, and I've said, go learn something, go do something, bring back something of value at the end of those 5 years if you think you're interested in the business. My grandfather gave me a great piece of advice when I came into business, because I was worried. I was the first one that was going into business with my dad. And you know, in one of those moments, my grandfather pulled me aside and said, just find someplace to make yourself invaluable. Find that niche. And I thought, and it was great advice, and the only thing I would add to that now is bring something invaluable with you when you come in. And that respect thing that I think maybe Jay talked about, you know, having trouble getting respect from the people that were there before you. I think if you're bringing something to the table, you can shorten that process. It's always going to happen. I mean, you're going to have to prove yourself one way or the other.
Right.
But I expect if my kids want to come into the business that they bring something. My oldest is 27, and before, he now lives in Laos, but right before he moved, he talked about coming into the business. And I really told him I didn't think it was a good fit, and that he was a good fit for what we did, and that he was in the right place and had a great career going, and encouraged him and said, you know, because he said, well, I'm really strong at managing people. And I said, I get that, but we don't do a lot of managing people. That's not something that you can bring to our organization and do something with. So, you know, there may be another opportunity for him. He's in technology, and there may be a time when our organization is big enough that can support sort of a big-time technology role. But then I have another one who I've talked to quite a bit about coming into the business, and he's only been out of school for a year and a half. So he's got 3.5 more years to figure out what he can bring to us. And that's been a big part of our talk. But then it's all market, you know, they're going to come in just like anybody else would come in off the street. And you know, ownership's a different thing. If I decide to give stock to my kids, or my brothers decide to give stock to their kids, or at some point we sell to the next generation, also have to have that frank conversation that there's no guarantee that there's going to be a business 5 years after they come in that's owned by us, and have those very frank conversations with people and let people know that everything's on the table.
Yes.
If that's true. So it gets back to that transparency thing.
Tom?
It's funny, I never thought about this story until listening to you guys talk. My grandfather had a small business, and my father, when he was in college, he said his major was dad's business. and this was in the late 50s. And my dad's senior year, my grandfather sold the business. And what do I do? And I told Deanna, I'll make 120 enemies today. When I said I don't personally believe in bringing kids into the business. I didn't start the company to bring my kids into the business. I started it for me, very selfish reason. I believe there was a niche market for us to fill where I could make a lot of money, build something of worth, and provide a really great work environment for the people who worked for me and with me. It was never about being able to pass something over to my kids, which is different than a lot of people. And my belief, fundamentally, for my kids and my family, is the cons of what could happen far outweigh the positives that could happen as a result. And as I told Deanna, the reason you have jobs working with this is what I'm afraid of for my own kids. And that's just a personal thing, and then I see it with my clients. But on the flip side, I totally get it. I get, as my kids get older, my son's 14, my daughter's 12, and my youngest son is 9. And because I'm in the job, we have a business unit that places kids right out of college. And last year we placed almost 3,000 kids 0 to 2 years out of college. So I look at my kids and I look at very consultatively from my own profession
Sure.
of what they'd be good at. And to your point about your oldest, I look at my oldest son and I tell him that if he was here, there's no shot in hell of you ever working for my company. I mean, you'd be miserable and my company would go down the toilet, whatever role you were in. And now my daughter, on the other hand, she might be able to grow us 10x, so,
Yeah.
but I still don't want her. So, but and that's just my own personal feelings.
Understood. Pete?
So
Succession,
I'm
'cause
kind of
you've
on the
made-
opposite side because I've had an unbelievable experience with the relationship I have with my dad. We're extremely close, similar to you, very trusting relationship. It's been a really unique experience because we get along. We're together all the time. So we think very similarly. We operate very similarly. So it's just been I'm so glad that I did that. And on the flip side, because my experience was so positive and is so positive, us not having true controlling ownership in the company concerns me because I'd like to have the same relationship with my son, assuming he produces, has the ability to do great things. So that's probably one of my major concerns right now is we made this decision to do that. He could still be within the business, or my daughter as well, but it's just been a really great experience for me. The thing that, from a policy standpoint, the thing that so my dad sucked me into it.
Yeah.
We dealt with the 4 of my generation differently, though. We looked at it purely, do they have the desire to be there? Do they want to be there? So we're not approaching them. They're going to approach us. And do they have the ability to do it? So if we truly believe taking emotion out of it, they have the desire and ability to do it, then we're going to talk seriously. But the main policy was you had to have a bachelor's degree, assuming you were going in a role that required education. We expected master's degrees for roles that should have higher education. And it's been good.